All right, let's get to the Pentagon. It looks like the briefing is about to be underway as we do expect to learn more about this leaker and possibly who it is. Let's listen.
First of all, we are aware of the press reports regarding a potential suspect in the Department of Justice's ongoing investigation into unauthorized disclosures of documents appearing to emanate from throughout the intelligence community. Because this is an ongoing criminal investigation, I will have to refer you to the DOJ for any questions. This is a law enforcement matter, and it would be inappropriate for me or any other DoD official to comment at this time. And certainly when we have more to provide from the Department of Defense, we will. In the meantime, as Secretary Austin has stated, the department is taking the issue of this unauthorized disclosure very seriously. We continue to work around the clock, along with the interagency and the intelligence community, to better understand the scope, scale, and impact of these leaks. And just as we're limited in what we can say about the DOJ's ongoing investigation, we'll be also very limited in what we can say about any of the documents themselves. And while we certainly understand the media's interest in asking questions about the contents of these documents, I will highlight that as a matter of long-standing policy, just because classified information may be posted online or elsewhere does not mean it has been declassified by a classification authority. And those of you who have been covering the Pentagon for a long time know that we're just not going to discuss or confirm classified information due to the potential impact on national security, as well as the safety and security of our personnel and those of our allies and our partners. And for that reason, we will continue to encourage those of you who are reporting this story to take these latter factors into account and to consider the potential consequences of posting potentially sensitive documents or information online or elsewhere. Separately, Secretary Austin hosted Latvia's Minister of Defense, Inara Murniece, today at the Pentagon. The leaders discussed the strength of the U.S.-Latvia defense relationship and ongoing efforts to support Ukraine. They also discussed shared security interests in Europe, including NATO's deterrence and defense posture ahead of the July NATO summit in Vilnius. A readout will be available later today. Staying on Europe for a moment, next week, Secretary Austin will travel to Sweden to meet with his counterpart to discuss security-related topics shared by our two nations. From there, he'll travel to Germany, where he and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, will host an in-person meeting on April 21 of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group at Ramstein Air Base. This will be the 11th meeting of the UDCG since this vital forum was established by Secretary Austin 1 year ago. The Secretary and General Milley will join ministers of defense and senior military officials from nearly 50 nations around the world to discuss the ongoing crisis in Ukraine and to continue our close coordination on providing the Ukrainian people with the means necessary to protect themselves against Russia's unprovoked and illegal aggression. And as we've highlighted before, the contact group has been instrumental in identifying, synchronizing, and ensuring delivery of the military capabilities the Ukrainians need to defend their homeland. And on a semi-related note, at the end of this month, the Arkansas Army National Guard's 39th Infantry Brigade Combat Team will replace the New York Army National Guard's 27th Infantry Brigade Combat Team and assume command of the Joint Multinational Training Group Ukraine at Grafenwehr Training Area in Germany. The 27th Infantry Brigade Combat Team took charge of the JMTGU during a transfer authority ceremony in August of 2022, becoming the first and only unit in the JMTGU's 8-year history to assume the unit mission for a second time. We look forward to the arrival of the 39th and the continuation of the important work to provide Ukraine what it needs in terms of training to defend itself. And with that, I'll be happy to go to your questions. We'll go ahead and start with AP Tarakap.
Thank you, General Ryder. So can you confirm that Airman First Class Jack Teixeira, a member of the Massachusetts Air National Guard, is a person of interest in this leaked documents case? And I have several other questions.
Sure. So first of all, as I mentioned, there is an ongoing criminal investigation. And so anything related to that, I'm going to need to refer you to the DOJ or the FBI.
Can you speak at all to if anyone in the Department of Defense has reached out to this airman? Do you know where he is? There are reports that law enforcement is closing in on this airman's location. So has anyone been able to reach out to him?
Again, Tara, appreciate the question, but again, given that this is an ongoing investigation, I'm not going to be able to talk about the investigation or any potential DOJ actions, so I'd refer you to them.
Okay, in the days after the leaks came to light, what steps has DoD taken to reduce the number of people who have access to not only these classified briefings, but the classified material in general?
Sure. So we continue to review a variety of factors as it relates to safeguarding classified materials. This includes examining and updating distribution lists, assessing how and where intelligence products are shared, and a variety of other steps. I would say, though, that it is important to understand that we do have stringent guidelines in place for safeguarding classified and sensitive information. This was a deliberate criminal act, a violation of those guidelines. And so, again, I think that's important to understand. Now, we will continue to do everything we can to ensure that people who have a need to know when it comes to this kind of information have access to that. We're always going to learn from every situation. But again, this is something that we'll continue to look at.
But you are taking steps to tighten that, I guess, population who might have access to this level of information.
That's accurate. Again, we continue to review those distribution lists, update them, make sure there's a need to know. But again, let me just emphasize my point that this was we have rules in place. Each of us signs a non-disclosure agreement. Anybody that has a security clearance. And so all indications are, again, this is a criminal act, a willful violation of those. And again, another reason why we're continuing to investigate and support DOJ's investigation.
And just last question. Do you have a sense that this is just the act of one individual? And even if so, wouldn't members of his chain of command also be held accountable for this lost information?
Again, I don't want to speculate or get ahead of the DOJ's investigation. We need to allow that to run its course, and so I'd refer you to them. Let me go ahead and go to Gordon, and then I'll come back to Jen.
Yeah, Pat, just two questions. One, just to clarify, in DOD's efforts to change the way you do business in terms of protecting classified information, apart from the stuff that you do already, is that DOD-led or is that joint staff-led? Who's kind of directing what on that? And the second question is just hypothetically, I know you like hypotheticals, if somebody was to be charged, what would determine whether the military would charge and indict and carry out the legal process against that person or people or DOJ?
Yeah. So on your latter question, you're right. I don't want to get into hypotheticals. I will say that, as always, every case is judged on its own merits. And we need to allow this investigation to run its course. And then, of course, there'll be more to say on that. On your first question, again, it's important to understand that this is not just about DOD. This is about the U.S. government. This is about how we protect and safeguard classified information. And as I highlighted, we do have strict protocols in place. So anytime there is an incident, anytime there's an opportunity to review that and refine it, we're, of course, going to take advantage of that. Within the Department of Defense, as you've heard us say, Secretary Austin has been convening daily meetings with his senior leaders, to include the chairman, to talk about reviewing the scope and the impact of this, and also to look at mitigation measures and what we need to do across the Department of Defense to ensure that we're doing our utmost to reinforce existing policies, procedures, and rules. And if there are any areas where we need to tighten things up, we certainly will.
But you've made some changes already.
That's correct, as I mentioned to her. When I say DOD, I mean the Department of Defense, across the entire enterprise. Okay, Jen.
General Ryder, you say that there are strict protocols in place, and yet a 21-year-old airman was able to access some of the nation's top secrets. How did this happen, and isn't this a massive security breach?
Again, we need to allow the investigation to run its course. We'll, of course, know more when that is completed, so I'd refer you to DOJ on that.
What is your message to anyone who might be thinking of leaking these kind of documents in the future?
Look, again, we have procedures, we have protocols in place. We receive regular training on the proper handling of classified information. As I mentioned, we sign non-disclosure agreements. So those rules are very clear, and anyone who has a security clearance knows that. Anyone who violates those rules is doing so willfully.
Can you put into context the damage that has been done by this leak?
Again, right now, we're continuing to assess the scope and the impact, and so that's work that will be ongoing. Tony?
How large was the distribution network for these documents, say, prior to last Thursday when the disclosures came out? Are we talking in thousands of people that had access inside the Pentagon and outside the Pentagon, to include Europe and bases around the United States?
Yeah, Tony, so I don't have any numbers to provide you. As I'm sure you can appreciate, the Department of Defense and all of our components, it's a global enterprise doing work in all areas of the world. And so certainly we have people who have access to information that they need to do their jobs, but I don't have any numbers for you.
Can you say it was widespread, though, versus, outside the Pentagon, though, and to other military installations?
Well, again, the Department of Defense, we conduct global operations. So intelligence products, operational information products are shared with DoD leaders and personnel globally throughout the world, whether it's at a component command, whether it's in the services. But again, the important thing to understand about classified information, it's not just I want to have access to it because I have a clearance. It's all based on need to know. Do you have a need to know that information? And that typically will grant you access if you have the appropriate clearances.
Thanks.
Thank you. Travis?
Thanks, Pat. I'm still confused on the access issue. You said that there were changes that were made, but you also said that you're reviewing things. Can you tell us, are there less people who have access to this type of information today than there were a week ago?
So Travis, again, I'm not gonna get down to numbers. Again, reviewing distribution lists, looking at who has a need to know, making sure those things are updated, doing due diligence in the wake of these unauthorized disclosures. Again, though, I want to emphasize that this was a deliberate criminal act to violate those guidelines and rules, in the same way that if you locked your front door and somebody came into your house and took something, you followed your procedures and you locked your door, but somebody went in your house and took something and put it out on the street. That's what we're talking about here. Let me go to Carla.
Just a couple questions on this, and then I have a follow on something separate. Why did it take so long to brief the secretary about the leaks? He said that he was briefed on April the 6th. And would you classify that delay as a failure of the open source intelligence teams?
Absolutely not. We were notified, the department became aware on the 5th. The secretary was briefed hours later in the morning of the 6th. I don't consider that a delay. Thanks.
But to follow on that, these documents were available long before April 5th and 6th. So what took so long for DOD and the intelligence communities to locate these documents?
Yeah, so that's really something that the investigation will tell us. That said, I think it's important to remember that DOD's intelligence activities are primarily focused.
All right, we're going to come out from this for just a second to bring you this Fox News alert. We'll get back to the briefing at the Pentagon in just a moment. This just in, the FBI has made an arrest. We are now learning the FBI has made an arrest and is continuing to conduct authorized law enforcement activity at a residence in North Dighton, Massachusetts. This is an ongoing matter, says the FBI. We cannot provide further comment at this time. One can obviously say that this is happening, with this happening at the Pentagon in this moment, although no specific name has been given to us via that statement.
And as the news spreads there in the briefing room, Brigadier General Pat Ryder will likely start getting some questions about this arrest. Interesting to point out, he was asked by Jen Griffin, how do you stop something like this from happening again? And he said in part, we have procedures and protocols in place. Everybody signs an NDA. It didn't work in this case.
Yeah. Calling this a deliberate criminal act, a direct violation of classified guidelines detailing an ongoing criminal investigation. The former Defense Secretary Mark Esper is still standing by with us, but first we're going to dip back into the Pentagon for more news. We'll get to the Secretary in just a moment.
We go to Dave.
Can you just tell us what the mission of the 102nd Intelligence Wing for the Massachusetts Air National Guard was, and are you going to release this airman's service record in response to, I'm sure, the thousands of requests you've already gotten?
Yeah. So David, on the service record, again, we'll take that and we'll provide an update when we're able to. In terms of the 102nd Intelligence Wing, I don't have that in front of me. I'm positive they have a website. We can quickly find the fact sheet up there. In general, intelligence wings throughout the Air Force support is what you might imagine, Air Force intelligence requirements worldwide to support a variety of types of intelligence missions and requirements. So, which include active guard and reserve components. So we go, Brandy, and I'll come to Orrin.
Thank you so much, General Ryder. What technologies is the Pentagon applying right now to both spot leaked documents online and track potential indicators of leaking type practices? Do you plan to be investing in more?
Again, Brandy, so when it comes to this particular situation, we'll know more when the investigation is concluded. As I highlighted, when it comes to intelligence collection within the Department of Defense, that's focused primarily internationally. I'm not going to get into the specifics of where, how, and when we conduct our intelligence activities, but we're always looking at potential gaps, potential vulnerabilities, and that's something that will just be ongoing work.
You are using technologies right now to spot potential leakers of future documents.
You're asking me a hypothetical, basically. Again, we're always going to be on the lookout. We're always going to be on the lookout for any potential insider threats. Again, we get training on how to spot insider threats. But again, as I mentioned to Travis, you've locked your door. You've lent some keys to your friends. If one of those friends decides to give the keys away, hopefully you've been able to clue in on those signals. So we'll continue monitoring.
I don't think it's lost on anyone in this room that this is all happening at the same time that Deputy Secretary Hicks is conducting a review of the Pentagon's classification practices and at times overclassification. So can you talk about how this incident is informing that ongoing review?
Again, I think that there's the investigation that the DOJ is conducting. And then you're talking about something separately, which is, again, our review of classification requirements, acknowledging that where we need to be better in terms of classification.
So it's having no impact on Hicks's
Thank you.
review.
I'm going to go on to Orrin here. Yep.
I want to come back to the question of distribution on two different questions. Given the gravity of the situation, are you actively paring down the distribution list now? Is this a process that's moving quickly? Or is it going to take time for there to be meaningful substantive changes to the distribution? And then is DOD or has DOD taken additional measures to restrict the access to classified information of others in the Massachusetts Air National Guard?
So, Orrin, broadly speaking, I think I've already answered the question that yes, we are taking and have taken steps to review distribution lists and to ensure that the folks receiving information have a need to know. But again, to belabor the point, we have safeguards in place. We have processes. We have procedures. We'll continue to do due diligence as part of this review to ensure that we're doing everything we can to prevent potential unauthorized disclosures in the future, recognizing that, again, this was a criminal deliberate act. Thank you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.